Most people in this space are trying to change what they see. They are working on the outer picture, the job, the relationship, the bank account, through visualization, through affirmations, through scripting. And results are slow, or absent, or they arrive and then collapse. Here is what Neville Goddard actually identifies as the root of the problem. It is not your desire, it is not your belief, it is not your vibration, it is your past, not your past as a story you tell yourself. Your past as an active force that is generating your present, right now, in real time. Every experience you are living today is the harvest of a state your imagination occupied yesterday, last week, last year. The subconscious does not distinguish between what happened and what you imagined. It simply executes what it received. But here is where Neville says something that most teachers in this space walk right past. You can revise the past, not metaphorically, not as a psychological trick to feel better, as a literal act of creation. The past is not fixed. It is an impression in consciousness, and impressions can be changed. When you change the impression, you change what it generates. This is the revision technique, and it is the most structurally precise tool in all of Neville Goddard's work. This video is the mechanism underneath that tool, why it works, where it comes from, and how to use it in a way that actually moves the needle. In the Mandukya Upanishad, one of the shortest and most structurally precise texts in all of Vedic philosophy, consciousness is described in 4 states. Most Western teachers focus on 2, the waking state and the dream state. But the Mandukya identifies a 3rd state that carries more creative weight than either of those. It is called prajna, deep sleep, the state where all impressions are stored, compressed, and prepared for projection into waking reality. The Sanskrit term for these stored impressions is samskaras. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali define samskaras as grooves carved into consciousness by repeated experience and repeated thought. Every time you respond to a situation with a particular emotional charge, you deepen a groove. The groove becomes a default, the default becomes automatic. And now you are not creating your reality. Your accumulated past is creating it for you. This is precisely what Neville identifies when he says, "The present is not what we want, but what the past has produced." He is not speaking poetically. He is describing a mechanism. Your present experience is the output of past impressions. Change the impression, and you change the output. This is not a metaphor for positive thinking. This is the architecture of consciousness as described in both the Vedic tradition and Neville Goddard's own lectures, separated by centuries and geography, arriving at the identical structural conclusion. And the technique Neville calls revision is, at its core, a deliberate overwriting of samskaras. You are not trying to feel better about what happened. You are replacing the groove itself. Here is where the mechanism becomes precise, and where most practitioners of this technique are leaving results on the table. The subconscious mind does not receive impressions equally across the day. Neuroscience and Vedic philosophy converge on this point from completely different directions. There is a specific window, the hypnagogic state, the threshold between waking and sleep, where the conscious mind's filtering capacity drops to near 0, and the subconscious is maximally receptive to new impressions. Patanjali identifies this threshold as the boundary between Jagrat and Svapna. In this liminal state, the critical faculty that normally filters your imagination is suspended. What you feed the mind in this window does not get evaluated. It gets accepted. Neville Goddard builds his entire practice around this window. The instruction he gives is not incidental. He is not saying, try to think positive thoughts before bed. He is saying, this specific moment is the most direct access point to the layer of consciousness where reality is generated. When you perform the revision technique at the edge of sleep, you are not doing an exercise. You are making a deposit directly into the mechanism that runs your waking life. Here's what the technique actually requires. And this is the part that separates results from non-results. You are not replaying a memory. You are not correcting a memory. You are constructing a new one so fully that the first internal response you have when you recall that event is the revised version, not the original. The subconscious does not store events as recordings. It stores them as states. When the state changes, the event changes. When the event changes, the pattern it was generating changes with it. That is the mechanism, not belief, not willpower. State-level revision at the threshold of sleep. Now here is where Neville introduces something that takes this further and challenges a deeply held assumption in Western manifestation teaching. The standard model says, you can only change yourself. You can only work on your own consciousness, your own belief, your own state. Others are outside your creative jurisdiction. Neville disagrees completely. In his lectures, he describes what he calls the telephone technique. He uses it to assist a friend in her 50s who wants to return to an electronics plant where she had previously worked. She believes her age will be held against her. The external evidence supports that concern. The rational position would be to accept the limitation and adjust the goal. Neville does neither. He does not visualize her getting the job. He does not send her energy. He does not affirm on her behalf. He hears her voice internally, in imagination, telling him she got the job, excited, specific. The tone of someone whose world just changed. He hears her tell him the details. Not only did they give her the job, they gave her a salary increase, and they credited her for her previous 10 years of service toward retirement. 1 week later, she calls with exactly that news. The distinction Neville is making here is surgical. He did not imagine the outcome as an observer watching it happen. He imagined the conversation that would naturally follow from the outcome being real. The phone call, her voice, her words, her excitement. This is the difference between imagining a thing and imagining from a state where the thing already exists. The observer watching a thing happen is still outside it. The person receiving the phone call is inside the reality of it. The inner movement is completely different, and the subconscious responds to the inner movement, not the mental image. This is what the Bhagavad Gita calls nishkama karma, action without attachment to the fruits, performed from a state of established consciousness rather than anxious desire. When Arjuna asks Krishna how to act rightly in the world, Krishna does not say, want it more. He says, establish yourself in yoga, in union with the truth of what already is, and then act from that ground. The telephone technique is that principle made practical. You are not hoping for the outcome. You are already in the conversation that follows it. Tonight, not eventually, tonight, you have a specific window to work with. As you move into sleep, before the body surrenders completely, run through the events of the day, not as a journal, not as a review, as a revision session. Find one event that did not match what you wanted, one conversation that went sideways, one moment where you felt diminished, overlooked, or denied. Just one. Take that event and rebuild it, not what you wish you had done differently, but what would have happened if reality had moved in your favor. Build the scene with the same granularity as the actual memory. Use the same people, the same location, the same time of day, but change what they say. Change how they respond. Change the emotional texture of the encounter entirely. Do not rush past this. Stay in it. Repeat the revised scene until the feeling of it becomes more real than the feeling of the original. You are not trying to feel positive. You are trying to make a new impression. The benchmark is simple. When you recall this event tomorrow, which version comes first, the original or the revision? When the revision comes first, the work is done. For revising the circumstances of others, use Neville's precise instruction. Do not visualize them in a situation. Hear them tell you about it. Hear the specific words they would use. Hear the specific emotion in their voice when they share the news. That phone call, that conversation, is the state you are inhabiting. And the state is what the subconscious registers as real. This practice, used with consistency, does not just change individual experiences. Patanjali's description of the samskara process makes clear that grooves deepen or weaken with repetition. Regular revision weakens the patterns that have been generating unwanted results. The mind, deprived of the impressions that fed the old patterns, stops producing them, not through willpower, through starvation of the groove. Here's the payoff, the thing underneath everything in this video. Neville Goddard's revision technique is not a manifestation hack. It is not a way to trick your subconscious into feeling better about the past. It is a direct statement about the nature of time itself. In linear time, the past is fixed. It happened. Its consequences are locked into a chain of cause and effect that runs forward into your future, whether you want it to or not. But Neville's entire cosmology and the Vedic understanding of Maya, of the phenomenal world as a projection of consciousness, rests on a different premise. Time is not linear. It is a dimension of consciousness. The past exists as an impression in awareness, and awareness can be revised. The Mandukya Upanishad's final state of consciousness, Turiya, the fourth, is the witness awareness that underlies and contains the other three. From that ground state, waking, dream, and deep sleep are all movements within consciousness, not experiences that happen to it. The past is not behind you. It is a layer of the present, held in place by the current state of your awareness. When you revise, you are not going back in time. You are shifting the layer of consciousness in which that event lives. You are changing the ground from which it continues to generate. Neville says, the present is not what we want, but what the past has produced. The corollary, the part he builds his entire practice on, is this. If you change what the past produced, you change what the present is. That is not a technique. That is the nature of consciousness itself. Revision is simply you learning to use it deliberately. Everything is available to you in this moment, not because of effort, not because of positive thinking, because the awareness that contains the past also has the authority to revise it. You are that awareness. Start tonight.